So, who am I? I come from Ashburton. I grew up on a farm here out in Montalto, out of Mayfield. I went to Montalto School, and I went back and visited it recently, and I couldn't believe it. So it's all relevant. A lot of people ask me what qualifications I have and all of those sorts of things. I don't have any. I left school on the day I was 15 years old. I enjoyed primary school, loved it. Went to Ashburton College and I hated every minute of it. It just wasn't me, it didn't fit, and I wanted to get away from there as soon as I could. And I started work. Now, none of you are actually old enough to remember this, but I started work at IGA in the Triangle. And some of you might come back as far as Super Value when it was in the building here, but even then you might not remember. IGA moved to Super Value, and that's where I worked. I then did a little bit of change around, and I worked for another grocery firm, and then I drove a truck for a while. Then there was a irrigation firm here from Australia who was looking for someone to run their office. The most unlikely candidate to run somebody's office, but I was appointed as the South Island Office Controller for Southern Cross Irrigation, and would be dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars from farmers who were purchasing irrigation projects and then going out and trying to get them to pay for them. And then in that period of time I got married to Alison, who's my long-suffering wife now for 45 years. And the reason I'm here today at Community House, because she got sick of me at home. We became Salvation Army ministers, another most unlikely situation, and spent most of our time serving as ministers in the North Island. And so after 36 years of living in the North Island, we moved back to Ashburton for me to retire, and for Alison was going to look for some work and see what happened. We renovated our house in the first year, and that was a lot of fun, and we got everything sorted, and then Alison said to me, "You're getting on my nerves, go and find something to do," and the job here at Community House came up, and here I am. My background really though is in fundraising, and it started when I was very young, because I'm not that, 35 years, so I must have been young, and started with the Salvation Army. And I've worked for several different organisations, for Aged Concern, Wellington City Mission, the Stroke Foundation, Aphasia in New Zealand, ME in Auckland, and now here at Community House. And my role at Community House isn't just fundraising, it's a small part of it in here, which I really quite enjoy. So that's enough about who I am. That gives you a bit of a quick overview of who I am. And I'm going to talk to you mainly about some of the fundraising experiences that I've had along the way, and what those might have meant within the communities that I've worked with, and what that might mean, because Muriel told me I could talk about anything I liked, so I did. But I want to ask you a question first. If today you were being asked the question, what would I really like to do in the organisation? What's a project in the organisation that I would really like to do, but I haven't got any money to do it? what would you say might be a project? Anybody got any ideas?
New building.
New building, yep. All right. Let me talk to you about some of the projects that I've run into along the way. We arrived in the Taranaki in 1989, and we arrived at a small church congregation that were doing nothing but church in the community, and it was in Waitara in Taranaki, and the freezing works had just closed. And so everybody had lost their jobs, the town was falling apart, and we needed to do some more things. Rightly, the church in Waitara was also dying quite quickly. And so we got involved with some of the community things there, and we managed to get a building to meet with people every day who were coming in from looking for work, and what am I going to do, and we had people come in and speak because they'd all been given a big payout, and the danger was that they were all going to do a really great job of spending that really quickly. And so we had to try and talk to them about how they might budget their way through that. And this was the first experience or the second experience that I'd had after being made a Salvation Army minister. The first one was on the second day we arrived, somebody died and I had a funeral to do. I'd never done one of those either. We got that happening, and then we saw an opportunity further up the road in a little settlement called Bell Block, which is in between New Plymouth and Waitara. And we started a children's program there, and on the first night 50 children turned up. We had expected that might be 15, and we would have been happy with that, and 50 children turned up. Well, I don't know whether you've ever played the chocolate game where you put a hat on and a scarf around your neck, and then you have to cut the chocolate with a knife and fork and try and pick it up. Well, try doing it with 50 children with one block of chocolate. It was kind of an interesting night. That led to a church opening in the area for the Salvation Army, and then that was okay. We bought a little church that had belonged to the Anglican Church. Then they'd built a brand new whiz-bang one, and around it was a whole lot of land that we used to we had sheep on to graze. They weren't our sheep, they were somebody else's sheep, and they just grazed it. And it was, what were we going to do with this piece of land? And we had a dream about what might happen, because there was a lack of housing for seniors. But we knew that we would probably never ever get any money for it, because no one was feeling generous to give us the funding to do it. And then one day a lady turned up and she said, we are the Bingham House Trust. And I've got two other ladies who want to come and meet with you. We've got some money because the house that we've had, which has been where elderly women have been living for some time, is closing up, because we're now the elderly woman who should be living in the house on the trust. And we wondered whether you could think of a project you might want to use this money for. And $387,000 later, we built 8 one-bedroom cottages that today are still operating in the area. And it was just an opportunity. The opportunity presented itself. We had to think quickly, and I just said, well, look, we would be really interested in building some independent living units around on the piece of land that we've got. Now, I know that some of you work for big organisations as well as smaller organisations that are local, which is a little bit easier. I worked for the Salvation Army, which was a nightmare because you went from step to step to step to step to step, and I was down here somewhere, and the people I had to convince were way up here, and I had to take all these steps to get there. So I rang our headquarters in Wellington, not knowing what I was meant to do anyway, and I said to the property secretary, could we build some independent living units? He just laughed. He said, it's never going to happen. I said, well, what if I had $387,000 to put to it? And he said, then it probably might be able to happen. And it did, and we managed to build these units. It's just thinking about that as an opportunity, and these kinds of opportunities do present themselves along the way, and it's just keeping an ear to the ground. They could have, these ladies, the house was in New Plymouth. They could have quite easily gone to anybody else in New Plymouth, but for some reason I got connected with them because we'd been in the paper about what we were doing and the fact that we had done all this stuff with children, and it was my wife who did all of that, and it was amazing, and blah 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 for the community. We were actually operating in an old shopping centre, but that never worked, and it didn't have anything on the ground. It was concrete floor, and the walls hadn't been painted. They'd been plastered but not painted, and kids didn't mind. They could put all their pictures up and everything, and then it led to this. So look out for opportunities that present was the thing that lodged in my mind. And as I've gone forward, I've seen that those things have always been, there've been lots of opportunities that have presented along the way. And then we were moved to the Wairarapa and to Carterton, to another small congregation which grew. And there was a health crisis in the Wairarapa at the time. The local DHB was really concerned about the number of people who were not visiting their doctors, who had minor health issues that were turning into larger health issues because they weren't going there, and many of the people weren't able to go to the doctor because they already owed the doctor money for their the last appointment that they'd been, or the last two appointments, and the doctors wouldn't see them because they weren't paying. So they called this meeting together with the DHB, the local funders who were the licensing trust, and a hospital welfare trust or some group that had been set up, and a whole lot of social service organisations. And they gave us about a week's notice that this was going to happen, and would you like to come along and be part of this? So I went, but I went prepared. I'd thought about it, and I went along with a proposal because I thought that was what they wanted. I didn't realise that they were wanting to just sit down and chat about the thing which everybody else thought was the outcome. So I took a proposal along, and my proposal was to put a mobile health bus on the road with 2 nurses in it who did health checks for people. So it would park in your street and you could just walk out, and we went into the lower socioeconomic areas and it went on for about 4 years. And in the end they were doing immunisation and all sorts of things. And it struck me that the idea was to actually just take something along, and it was a good idea, and that they might like it. Well, they loved it. They loved the idea. Nobody else came with an idea. Everybody else came along and said, oh, it's terrible. The situation's awful, and we already knew that the situation was awful, but going along prepared. Well, the outcome was a Japanese imported bus was brought in to Ashburton. I had no idea where I was going to get a bus from. I had no idea what it would cost to get a bus, so I just made some numbers up that I thought might work. And I rang a friend here in Ashburton and said, could you talk to the people who do buses over in Tynwald? Used to do them over there. I don't know that they still do. See, and here's the design. And I'd drawn it out on a piece of A4 paper and sent it down as to what it would look like, and it'd have a little entrance foyer, and then there was a surgery in the back. And it was designed here, and he drove it up, and it arrived a few months later, and we got $250,000, which in the 1990s was quite a lot of money. And that was for over 3 years. And then other people came in and they saw the value of it, and they invested in it as well. So it's about being prepared for when you go to talk to people, and so that was another lesson that was learned along the way. And once it had finished in the Wairarapa, the bus was transported to Tonga, and has been operating with the children living at the dump in Tonga, and collecting aluminium cans to survive. They have to collect a certain number of cans every day to get the 50 cents that buys them the food that they were going to live on. And the health bus was transported to there. So being prepared and being committed to making it happen. And then so far I had no money. So on any of these projects so far there wasn't 1 cent raised prior to us having the idea. And then we're thinking big when it seems impossible. We had a project in it. The church is next door to this house, and in Carterton, and we'd outgrown the building with the programs that we were running, and it wasn't working. And at that stage, the Meals on Wheels that people were receiving in the Wairarapa were being made in Porirua and transported across the Rimataka Hill and then delivered to the people for lunch. And they were black by the time they got there. They were cold and horrible, and they had to be reheated, and it was pretty yuck. And people were worried about what they were going to do. And we needed a kitchen to operate out of, which the council would approve. So we talked to the neighbours who had lived there for 40 years and had no intention of moving. We did threaten them with a brass band every Sunday morning, but in the end they decided that they came back to us and said they did want to move, and we needed to purchase the house off them, and the house was $60,000 to purchase, and we didn't have any money. So I rang up and told them what I wanted, and they said no, and then I rang them and they said no, and in the end, the last day, somebody else who had some money, one of the other churches that had some money, said, well, we'll give you the money for 3 years interest free, but you've got to pay it back. And we said, so it was agreed that would happen, and we bought the house. And then the programs took off, and there was an adult day program which had elderly people coming in, being dropped off 3 days a week and cared for and fed and what have you, and a home care project. And we ended up employing 110 people, part-time and full-time employees, having had me and my wife as the employees of the organisation before in that part of the town. And then we had to do a major renovation on the back, which allowed for a brand new kitchen, and everything, because the Meals on Wheels went to 70 meals for the lunchtime in the South Wairarapa, Carterton and South Wairarapa, and 70 meals every day in Masterton going out. And so even when it seemed impossible, which it did seem impossible, there's always some way around and some opportunity that you can have. And we wouldn't have been able to do any of this either if it wasn't for the volunteers that we had. So the volunteers delivered the meals out every day, and we had to have a great list of volunteers who got involved and felt part of it. And we gave them a volunteer job description and a volunteer agreement that they signed, so that they knew that if they said they were going to be there Wednesday, that it was like working. It was like their employment contract. So they had to be committed to it, because we had to get the meals out, and they had to all be police checked and everything and what have you. I delivered a meal one day to a lady in Masterton, or I tried to deliver a meal to a lady in Masterton, and she was always there. She was never not there, and we couldn't reach her. And if she wasn't going to be there, she always rang, or she left a note on the door if she had to pop out, and she didn't. And she had died 3 days earlier, and her family lived on the other side of the island, over in Kapiti, and they said, had you not been going to her house, we probably wouldn't have found her for 3 weeks, because we wouldn't have been back over there to see her. So it was an important service as well as that. And it's all about understanding the need. So when we were appointed then to Hamilton, my wife was appointed to what was then the Nest, which had been a children's home, but was now like a large community centre, community caring centre that had counselling and various things in it. And one of the other programs it had in it was a family connection centre, and this was a place where there were 2 flats on the centre attached to the building, and they weren't really great. They were sort of the managers, when it was a children's home, they were the managers and the assistant managers' accommodation, and it was like a little, there was a door through and you're in the building basically. It wasn't really very private or anything like that, and didn't have any good facilities. The people who were going into these, who were going to this program, was a 6 to 8 week program of intensive parenting training, and it was mainly for people who were tied up with child, youth and family, and they were on the last chance to keep their children. And so my wife was part of running the program, and I was the fundraiser. And the Nest building was being sold, and a hospital was buying it. Braemere Hospital was buying the piece of land. They're going to demolish the whole lot and build on it. And they didn't know what they were going to do. They had a contract to do this project, this program, but they didn't have anywhere to do it. And she came home, talked to me about it, and I said, well, let's have a meeting, let's chat about what we can do. Who knows whether we can raise the money or not. It was a $650,000 project that bought 5 sunshine homes, they were called. They were like a cheap version of Lockwood, but if you're only going to be living in them for 6 or 8 weeks, it wasn't too bad. So actually this was built, and it was built freely, without any mortgage, anything like that was required, and it was one donation, it was one grant that gave the money. It took an awful long time. There was, it seemed like it seemed like years, but it was only about 9 months, I think, of backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And this is in Hamilton, this project. And the funds for this project came from Dunedin, from someone in Dunedin. They came up and we talked, and I went down and we talked, and then we sent them some picture ideas and bits and pieces. And this thing still operates. It operates slightly different now than it was in those days, but people went in, lived in the house. The houses were fully furnished. Everything was in there, right down to the cutlery. Everything was in. You just walked in the door. Families came in. They lived there for 6 weeks. They got all this training, and they either made it or they didn't make it. Not all of them made it, as you know. Not everybody makes it through. But this was another opportunity. And I didn't know anything about any of this, but I had to learn because I was doing the sales pitch. So it was beginning to understand what was needed in the community and what the benefit of it was going to be. And so, family connections. And then I kind of moved up a little bit and I became the Public Relations Secretary for the Salvation Army, and I was responsible for raising the money, $20 million a year, to to help run parts of the Salvation Army. Give me 100,000, well, we can do quite a bit more. He said, well, we're going to give you $1 million. But we want to know what you're going to do with it. And I'm thinking, I'm standing in the foyer at the church and he's wanting me to spend $1 million with him. Well, the main thing that had happened in Christchurch that I could see had happened was that people were disengaged with what was going on. They were stuck in difficult situations in homes and what have you, and everybody was coming in and no one was giving them any answers, and no one was actually showing them any care. They were trying to do as much as they could. So the insurance companies were coming in and the earthquake inspection people and all of these people coming and going, but no one was actually caring for them. So we decided we would do some care packs. I said, well, we'd probably do some care packs where we just put some really nice things into a plastic bucket that we would buy from the warehouse. I had no idea whether I could get a plastic bucket thing from the warehouse, one of those square boxes. And we'd just put stuff in it. And then we would deliver them to every household that's been affected, up to about 7,000 parcels. And he liked the idea, so they sent us $1 million the next day. And then they were so impressed with it, they came down and they got involved, and he came and packed a few packs for a bit of publicity and everything, as they normally do. And they were so impressed that they said, what else do you need? And so we bought 2 camper vans that went out into the community and just parked on the street, and they were open places. It was like a place where we could meet with people and they could come from out of their house and see us. And they travelled around for probably about 2 years they were used. And we got one of the vans is here, one of the trucks, I think the local Salvation Army guy drives around in the ute, somebody else gave us those. And they were from a relationship that we had been building from some time. And then I got to be involved in raising the rest of the money from people we'd built relationships from. And they were from within New Zealand and from overseas, so people coming in. One night, I'd flown to Christchurch on the red eye and had started work, and in the evening I had to be in Auckland to meet with people from Singapore, from Chevron, who was the oil company, and they wanted to go to dinner, so I tried to have a shower, which was not that easy always, and I put a clean shirt on and I got on the plane and flew to Auckland, arrived in Auckland at 6 o'clock at night, and I went to the motel, dropped my bag off at the motel, and I was to meet them at 7:30 for dinner, which I thought was quite nice. And we went to some fancy restaurant, which here I was in my Salvation Army gear at a fancy restaurant. Fancy restaurant to us was the fish and chip shop down the road normally, and it was an 11-course meal with all those little, little bits. If they'd put it all on a plate, we could have been out of there in an hour. But anyway, at 11:30, it finished the meeting. They gave me a cheque for $800,000, and I went back to the motel, and I sat in the chair and thought, I'm not even sure whether it's worth going to bed, because I'm on the red eye in the morning back to Christchurch, and I have to start work all over again. And then, so here I am with somebody giving me $800,000 eating in this fancy restaurant, and the next day I'm back on the street in Christchurch delivering food parcels to people. But it was all about relationships, and we'd built relationships with people, and so when this happened, it was made so much easier because of those relationships. So relationships with people like the Food and Grocery Council. The CEO of the Food and Grocery Council rang up and said, just tell me what you want and where you want it, and don't worry about ringing anybody, I'll ring them. And she did, and the trucks just kept coming, to the extent that we had to move 3 times because it was too dangerous to have the trucks coming into each place we were, so we ended up in a big warehouse. And people got fed and all sorts of things happened. There were moments of heartbreak that turned into great moments of joy. I was out on the street visiting houses, and I knocked on a house and the people were sitting outside. I knocked on the front door and they were around the back outside because they couldn't go inside. On the day of the earthquake, it had been their 7-year-old son's birthday, and they'd got up as any normal day, and he had opened his presents and was really happy, and then went off to school. And they never ever got back inside the house. The house was so severely damaged, and they lost everything in this house. And the kid it was a shocking story. And I went back up to Wellington to do breakfast with the business breakfasts that we were running. And I was really tired by this stage, and I had to go and speak at this business breakfast, which I did. And I told that story about the little boy. And just for that one thing, we raised $5,000 for that family, because people who were in the room understood what was going on, and we were able to help them with more than what was happening. If anything happens, for raising money, the thing that's one of the most important things is building really good relationships with people and taking time. And sometimes it feels like you're wasting your time. And sometimes it goes on and on and on and on and on for years, and then all of a sudden, click, something happens. And you end up, the relationship works out, and they see what you're doing, and you don't give up until too often people give up along the way because nothing seems to be happening. But it can take a long time to build a good relationship, and then there just happens to be the right time. And sometimes you have to be innovative with fundraising. And so here's a smaller charity a larger charity and a smaller charity. So while I was at the Sallies, they decided they wanted to do a CD. Some of the young people wanted to put together a contemporary CD for Christmas, another bloomin' Christmas CD. And they wanted to sell about 3,000 CDs off to help raise money for a music camp that they were having. So I'd been working with Progressive Enterprises for 6 years, and they weren't donating. Well, they were donating virtually nothing. The CEO gave me a cheque occasionally to get rid of me, I think. And they hadn't done really very much at all. Occasionally they'd give us a little bit of food or something like that for the food bank or whatever. And I was up visiting them, and the CEO said, "We've raised some money, we're going to give you a cheque today for $20,000, which I thought, wow, that's fantastic. And he said, "I don't know if there's anything else that we can do to help you." And I said, "Oh, well, it would be really great if we could do something in all of your stores. Actually, we've got this CD being made for Christmas for the kids are trying to sell, and they want to sell about 3,000 of them." And he said, "Oh, we wouldn't really be interested in 3,000 of them because it wouldn't. If we were going to do something, we'd need to do it across all of our stores because all of our advertising is the same." He said, "But if you wanted to, we'd be really happy to sell the CDs in store. What are you going to sell them for?" And we said, $5. Sell them off for $5. We've worked out what we could get them made for, and we'd make half of that back again. So he said, "We need 15,000 CDs for them." Well, 15,000 CDs, if it doesn't work, is a lot of CDs. And 15,000 CDs is a lot of CDs also when you don't allow for them to be put into the 10 per pack that they're going into. So that was the one mistake that we made the first year. We sold 25,000 CDs that first year, and they gave us, and they put little things on the cash register where people could make a donation, and they gave us a cheque for $780,000 from all of the sales. High blood pressure is the number one risk factor for stroke. Did you know that? Did you know that that there is a third of people, that 1 in 5 New Zealanders has high blood pressure, and a third of them don't know that they've got it. And that is one of the biggest worrying factors for the then Stroke Foundation of New Zealand. They'd been running a program with the local Rotary Club and a couple of other clubs where they went and with St John and what have you, and they went outside supermarkets on one day a year, and they took blood pressure readings from people, and they just used normal blood pressure reading machines. And 1 in 10 of those people that had been tested then were referred to their GP because they had very high blood pressure on the day that they were tested. Didn't mean that they were going to drop dead at that stage. We did have a couple of ambulance call-outs for people who they were really worried about. And 51% of the people who participated in it said that they were going to do something more, take more action about their lifestyle to get it. And we thought, well, how do we reach more people? Because we were only reaching, on one day of the year across the country, they were reaching about 16,000 people. But how do you reach more people, and how do you actually get a bigger message out? And Ryman Healthcare had their annual applications for funding come up, where all of the Ryman Healthcare villages raise money, and that money is brought together, and Ryman match it, and then it's given off to a charity to use for a year. And I had to put together a proposal for that, and they said, let's try and do something around blood pressure. So I said, well, with the success of the earlier health bus, what about the idea of a blood pressure van, which has been to Ashburton a couple of times as well. And we get some state-of-the-art blood pressure machines. So these things here, you put your whole arm into the machine, it closes around your arm and takes your blood pressure, and then it prints off a printout. So you come in, sit down, calm yourself down and have your blood pressure taken. When we do that at the field days, we had a photo of a cow's face and a photo around this piece here of a cow's bum. And we got one of those big gloves that the vets use that people put on, and they put their hand in. Farmers loved it. It got them, it was a bit of fun with it as well. And we were able to test a whole lot more people, and we were able to help a whole lot more people. And it was so successful that Ryman decided, and they've never done it before, Ryman decided that they would sponsor it again for a further 3 years, to keep the van on the road for a further 3 years. And I had met, every time I went to Auckland, I met with the head of philanthropy for Perpetual Guardian. And again, we got money from Perpetual Guardian, but just here and there. And they said, we'd really like to do something with you, but we can only do it in Auckland. And so they purchased the second van, and they have 2 of those vans operating. And so it cost just over $1 million to get the 2 vans and operate them. And they had staff on them and what have you. And they just travel around shopping centres and see people every day. We had to go where the people were to get through, because it's something a lot of people don't want to know. That's the number one thing that people said when you asked them would they like to come and have their blood pressure tested. They said, oh, it'll be high and we don't want to know. And then we would say to them, you're at risk of stroke with high blood pressure. We don't want to know, was their response. Sometimes you take a risk. Beanie Up was another thing that I did with the Stroke Foundation. How to raise some money, do something different that might capture people's imagination. And so we purchased a whole lot of beanies, and we sold them at $10 each, had them packaged up and put them into businesses and all over the place. First year raised $50,000 and thought, that's not too bad, but it was a lot of work. The second year it raised $210,000, and they've done it for a few years. I don't think they're still doing it, but got the idea from Australia, rang the company in Australia the charity in Australia that they were doing it, and they said, yeah, if we can sell beanies in the heat of it in Australia, we're pretty sure that you can sell them in New Zealand. So, but the risk was we had to outlay a lot of money. You had to buy the beanies up front again, and you had to do all the advertising. We had television advertising that we had produced ourselves, and got some good sponsorship on. The key for me was that I left school when I was 15, as I told you. I didn't have any great qualifications to be a fundraiser apart from the fact that I raised some money as I went along. But I had to surround myself with really good people. And those people I've worked with and seen go on to different jobs and to different places as well, and some of them I still work with after 20 years. I'm still working with the same marketer, and he produced the trailer that's across on the corner of Hankard Street at the moment. He produced the stuff for that, for our program here. The people that you surround yourself need to be aware that it's going to be hard work. They need to be passionate and committed to what they're doing, and they need to be skilled and understand what they're raising the funds for. So that's important. Too many people are actually trying to raise money and not understanding what they're actually raising the money for. It's really important. And this was always key to me. You need to pay people at the level of the skill that they bring. Not-for-profit charities are notorious at not paying people well. They're notorious at seeing that the fundraising team or the people who are bringing in the funds and doing it are not as important as everybody else in the organisation. They're the least important, but actually they're the most important, because they're the reason why everybody else is getting paid and able to do the great work that they do. And most of the fundraisers out there don't want any great accolades for what they're doing. They just want to support the people who are right at the front doing the job. But they need to be well paid. It's a key area for any not-for-profit organisation. So it does need the commitment from management of the organisation. You need to be committed to the person. And not much more else I can say on that. Small charities can grow. So I haven't only worked for large charities. I've worked for small ones, and I still work for one, even while I'm here. And this is a small charity as well. I would class a small charity as anyone who's operating for a budget of less than 500,000 would be a small charity. Many of those charities are solely reliant on money that comes in from trusts and foundations grants. They don't have large databases of people that they mail out to all the time, because they can't afford to do that. They're just reliant on trusts and foundations, because they made an application to someone to get the money in. And so they came and they paid me an absolute fortune. No, but they paid me what I was worth to raise funds for them. And so I took one of those charities from having an operating budget of $43,000 a year to this year having an operating budget of $210,000. And they're still only getting money from trusts and foundations. So the money's there, is out there, and people, and it's there. So it's about dreaming the dream. And the main thing is to have fun. This was a picture of my office at the Salvation Army's territorial headquarters. The staff decided it was my birthday, and this is what I came into. We did have a few like this, where the marketing manager's office was wrapped in tinfoil. Everything was wrapped in tinfoil, down to his stapler and his paper clips and everything like that. Are there any questions? So I'm hoping that was helpful. I didn't know, Muriel didn't tell me what she wanted me to do. I'm hoping that was helpful, and I'm hoping it encouraged you, because you don't for whoever's raising the funds at the places that you're at, you don't actually have to be a rocket scientist to raise funds, because I'm not a rocket scientist. In fact, sometimes, just as a bit of an aside, sometimes I take the applications home with me before I post them away, so that my wife would correct the grammar on them, and then I would redo them again. Yeah.
So Robbie's very self-deprecating, but he's really an amazing person. I picked that up very quickly when I came here to work. And you're a real treasure for our community.
Hmm.
I'm so glad you've come back to Ashburton. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Muriel. Thank you.